some newses. Let's just bring the BBC in, because if we're talking appalling reporting, we need to have the BBC on screen. I've mentioned over quite a few days now the fact that the war in Ukraine has been largely brushed from people's minds because it's not going well and the Ukrainians are taking huge casualties. But this caught my attention this morning because, of course, the BBC can now have its front page website full of death. The BBC loves death, and the earthquake is now going to deliver that for the BBC to pump into people's homes. But can you see the death in Ukraine? Well, probably you can't. Let's help you. Here it is, tiny little article. And this is because at the moment, defences in Ukraine are beginning to crumble. The casualties are absolutely huge, quite disgusting, but the BBC uses the earthquake to bury the bad news. Now, just before we move on, if we're looking at what's happening in the world around Ukraine, I couldn't resist this image, which the gentleman's expression top right says it all, as Biden gave this little clip. Let's hear what he had to say about the good works of the USA in respect to Ukraine.
Putin's invasion has been a test for the ages, a test for America, a test for the world. Would we stand for the most basic of principles? Would we stand for sovereignty? Would we stand for the right of people to live free of tyranny? Would we stand for the defense of democracy? For such defense matters to us because it keeps peace and prevents open season on would-be aggressors and threatens our prosperity. 1 year later, we know the answer. Yes, we would, and we did. We did.
So, Mike, I looked at the faces of the people clapping and I just saw brain dead people. They've got no real compassion for fellow human beings. They don't care about the vast casualties in Ukraine. They're simply clapping the mantra. And the mantra, of course, is going to be for the next war, we're told, against China.
So the question on my mind is, what about peace in Ukraine? Has anybody been working towards it? Now, I don't know that we can verify this, but perhaps we've got to believe what he says. This is the former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, and this is what he said in an interview that he gave a day or two ago. Both Moscow and Kiev, this is while he was most recently in post, his experience of this, both Moscow and Kiev had made important concessions and were close to a truce agreement. Putin had agreed to forego the demands for denazification and disarmament of Ukraine, and Zelensky had agreed not to seek NATO membership. He says, we updated the Americans and Macron and Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson adopted the aggressive line. Macron and Scholz were more pragmatic, and Biden was both, because Biden couldn't be anything with both. He's barely able to think. But anyway, the key point in this quote is Boris Johnson adopted the aggressive line. So he's singling Boris Johnson out for special treatment here. And he went on to say, I have one claim. There was a good chance of reaching a ceasefire had they not curbed it. So, David, very briefly, I'd just be interested in your thoughts on this, because he is clearly claiming that that both Ukraine and Russia were close to a peace agreement at one point, and Boris Johnson effectively put the kibosh on it.
Yes, I mean, this is consistent with what we've seen, the pattern of reactions and when Boris Johnson visited and the policy shifts that followed his visits. Within days or hours. And also, it's a relatively disinterested. It's hard to see exactly what this particular individual would have, what reason they would have to make this up. So I think this actually has the ring of truth about it. And it again highlights the issue. What has Boris Johnson and the British government been playing at? They certainly haven't shared that with the British people. They certainly haven't shared it with the Ukrainian people. And the result is prolonging the war.
Yes. And another comment here, this time from German politician, MEP, Martin Schirdewan, who's the leader of the left. Well, let's just translate this. The headline here is it's an interview with Spiegel saying, "I'm not a pacifist." So Spiegel asks him what he suggests about Ukraine. He said, "We've got to get out of military tunnel vision and towards a diplomatic solution. Pressure must be put on Vladimir Putin so he's willing to negotiate." I don't think too much needs to be put on. I think the pressure needs to be put on Zelensky. But anyway, the federal government could play an important role here, he said, for example, together with Brazil and China, but does not do so because the Chancellor is being driven into the military by the FDP and the Greens, especially the Greens. Some have mutated into gun lobbyists there. And then he was asked, the decision on the left is still the dissolution of NATO and the formation of a new security alliance, quotes, including Russia. It stays that way despite Putin, is the question. We must also define security beyond NATO, says Schirdewan, in view of the dangerous political tendencies in the USA or wars of aggression by NATO member Turkey, which violate international law. One has to consider how to make oneself independent. It's urgently necessary for Germany, as the largest economy in the EU, to talk to its European partners about how to organize Europe's security itself. So, again, using Ukraine to drive forward the European defense agenda. Yes.
Well, I mean, it's just interesting to watch all these pieces come together, but clearly the war in Ukraine is not accidental. It's a construct, and people are going to try and benefit from it every which way they can.
Yes. Where does that take us?
I think this takes us to you, David. You've been in communication.
Yes. So against the background of Ukraine and the steady increase in pressure for the West, Europe in particular, to rearm, against that background, we've been asking a few questions about the state of Britain's armed forces. One of them is, quote, "We request copies of technical assessments, reports and related correspondence related to the damage suffered by the propulsion system of HMS Prince of Wales, or the information contained therein." So I asked that back in December, back at the start of December, and I got a response to say, well, we should answer within 20 working days. But in this case, we have to have a public interest test, and that's tricky. So we need another month. So we'll get back to you by the 3rd of February. And if it needs longer, we'll let you know. That was big of them. So during, fair dues, on the 3rd of February, I got another piece of correspondence, further to a correspondence of 6th January. I am writing, so he is writing, so thank you for pointing that out, to inform you that we are still not able to provide you with a substantive response to your request for copies of technical assessments, reports and related correspondence concerning the damage suffered by the propulsion system of HMS Prince of Wales. I am sorry it is taking longer than originally hoped to conclude matters, and I can only ask for your understanding for the delay. I will contact you again once our requests have been concluded, or by the 3rd of March 2023, if the process has still not been concluded by then. So it seems that the determination, whether knowing what is wrong with HMS Prince of Wales, and whether that's in the public interest, is a very difficult question for the MOD.
Indeed.
Well, they've got a few problems, haven't they? Ships which don't go to sea, aircraft carrier not working, no guns because they've all been given away to Ukraine. It's orchestrated chaos and